Hi guys, this is Mrs. Edwards and I am coming to you from my car. I don't have Wi-Fi at my house to upload my lectures and stuff, so I am actually sitting in the parking lot of the school pirating Wi-Fi. But I could not miss this opportunity to talk to you because today, unfortunately, is Christopher Columbus Day. And I want to talk to you about that because there are a lot of misconceptions about Christopher Columbus Day. Now, hopefully you guys watched the little cartoon video that I had set aside for you on YouTube. And it might have been something similar to what you would have watched when you were in elementary school, because I watched that exact same video when I was in elementary school. And so I grew up thinking, oh, Christopher Columbus found America. He's this awesome guy. We have a holiday named after him. Sometimes we get out of school. Woo-hoo! So I was excited about it. And you know, back when President George W. Bush was president of the United States, he actually said Christopher Columbus was a great hero and an example to all Americans. And that just goes to show you how deep all of these misconceptions go about Christopher Columbus, that people don't know the truth. So today, I'm going to tell you the truth because you deserve to know. So first of all, Christopher Columbus, he was born in Genoa, Italy. We don't know 100% when, but we pretty much believe it's around 1451. And a lot of, I'll just go ahead and tell you about him before I get into the misconceptions. But anyhow, he believed that you could reach the eastern part of the world, talking about like Asia, that portion of the world, by sailing west. And so he went to several different monarchs in Europe and he was like, hey, can you give me money so I can sail west and try and get east? And they're like, no, I'm kind of preoccupied fighting a war. I don't want to give you money. So finally, he went to Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon. And these two were the leaders of what we know as Spain. And he talked them into sponsoring his voyage. Now, it took a while for it to happen because they had to finish fighting their war against the Muslims. And then once they took back their peninsula, you know, they were like, okay, Columbus, now we can give you some money. Now you can sail west. So that's what happened. And obviously he wanted to gain fame and fortune, and they did too. I mean, they're not just throwing money away. They want to get rich. But they also, you know, you have to understand at this point in history, they, in Europe, they are controlled by Catholicism. And when I say controlled, that is something that shapes all of their policies as far as government, as far as society, religion, everything is created based off of their beliefs in their Catholic faith. Okay, so they want to spread Catholicism. Excuse me. So then the facts are, he set sail on August 3rd, 1492. He had 3 ships, and he only, I want to say he only had like 250 men. Okay. When he landed on October 12th, 1492 in present day Bahamas. We don't know 100% sure like what specific island, but it was in the present day Bahamas. When he left settlers behind in modern day Haiti, or the Dominican Republic. It's the island of Hispaniola. And they were going to colonize and settle that island, and then he was planning on coming back. And he made 3 more voyages after that. Okay, so those are facts. Those may have been things that you have heard of before. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about some of the misconceptions here. Okay. First of all, one misconception: Columbus was the only one to believe that the earth was round. Okay. Lots of people are like, oh my gosh, you know, they all thought they were going to sail off the end of the world. They thought it was flat. No, they didn't. That is false. If you go back, the ancient Greeks, as early as like the 5th century BC, they believed that the earth was round. So that idea that, you know, he was so brave because he thought they were all going to sail off the edge of the earth, that's not really true. Now, was he brave? Probably. Heck yeah, he was. He didn't really know where he was going, but he went anyhow. So I would say he was probably brave, but to say that he was the one that discovered that the earth was round, that is totally false. Okay. Next claim. Columbus discovered the New World. All right, well, that is also false. First of all, the Vikings, there is evidence that the Vikings were in North America at least 500 years before Columbus set sail. Okay, they didn't stay and set up a permanent colony because they had too much conflict with the Native Americans. Gee, imagine that, somebody trying to take your land and you want to fight them for it. Crazy, right? So anyhow, the Vikings didn't stay, but there's other evidence that, that there could have been people here from Africa, people from all different places around the world that could have been here. But Columbus is given credit with discovering the New World. And the reason I say New World, it's not new. Okay, it's been there just as long as the rest of the world. And the idea that Columbus discovered it when there were millions of people living there already, that's not discovery. Okay, yeah, he figured it out, but there were already millions of people here. So let me give you an example. Let's say, all right, Morgan, I think you're in my second hour class, I think, or maybe third hour. I'm not really sure. Anyhow, so Morgan, I've never been to your house. But you know what? What if one day I just showed up and I was like, oh man, I've never been here before. I've discovered it. And I'm like, all right, Morgan, you have to leave your house. You have to, everything you have here is mine. And, that's just tough. And Morgan would be like, what? No, this is where I live. And I'm like, yeah, but I just discovered it. That's what the Spanish did to the Native Americans. They were living there. It was their house. It was their home. And the Europeans are like, oh, well, we just discovered it, so it's ours now. Baloney! It is not yours, but that's how they took it. Jerks. Okay, so anyhow, I get a little heated about that. Another common misconception, Columbus died penniless. Nobody appreciated everything that he did for, his discoveries and all of that kind of stuff. And he had no idea that he had discovered the New World. He thought he was in Asia the whole time. Okay, well, false, and lots of false right there. Okay, first of all, if they didn't appreciate what he found, they probably wouldn't have paid to send him back on 3 more voyages. Okay, just a thought there. Okay, second of all, he didn't die penniless. He was given some title like Admiral of the Ocean or something ridiculous like that. But he did get in a little bit of trouble because the Queen of Spain specifically told him, hey, if you encounter people, treat them well. Well, he didn't treat them well. He enslaved them and murdered them and raped some, and he didn't treat them very nicely. And so at one point, Christopher Columbus was actually brought back from the New World in chains as a prisoner. He spent 6 weeks in prison, and then the king was like, well, you kind of did a lot for us. You made us pretty rich, so I'm going to let you go. Okay, but he got sent back in chains. That's how bad of a dude he was. Okay? And then, hold on, I'm looking at my notes here. His diary, okay? Now, one thing I want you guys to look at when you're making your opinion on things is, what kind of source is this? Like, is this somebody who's making things up and living in their mom's basement and, just trying to create problems? Or is this actually a primary source? A primary source, somebody who was there, somebody who saw it, a diary entry, a letter from somebody who was there. Those are primary sources. So right now, I'm going to read you from a primary source. This is from Christopher Columbus's journal. He himself wrote this. He said, I have come to believe that this is a mighty continent, which was hitherto unknown. Okay, he wrote that in his journal. So this idea that he died having no idea he reached a new continent, that's not entirely true. I don't think he knew exactly where he was, but he had some pretty good idea. Oh, hey, this is not the Indies after all. I made a mistake there. All right. So let's talk about the truth. Okay. So I told you guys Columbus did not discover the New World. So that begs the question, why do we talk about Columbus and not others? Why do we not talk about the other people? Okay, well, one reason why, the printing press, which allows people to write things down and distribute that information, that was not invented until around 1440. So all of those other stories of people who traveled possibly to the Americas, we don't know about them because they were just stories passed down verbally, orally. It wasn't until Columbus's journey that somebody actually wrote it down, and then people are like, oh man, that happened? That's for real? Yeah, it's for real. That really happened. So that's part of the reason that he's the only one we talk about. Okay. Another thing, at this time, history is written by the winners. History at this time was written by Europeans. They didn't really want to listen to anyone else's version of history. And so they're the ones that write everything down. So let me just show you some evidence of someone else who was there. I don't know if you guys have heard of Alexander the Great. He was one of the greatest conquerors in all of world history. And he had a ginormous library. Okay. And this library, well, basically a map was found in Turkey, and it was dated 1513. And it was supposed to be based off of this material that was found from Alexander's library, his great library. And it had maps that were drawn of the coastlines of South America and Antarctica. Okay. And so, I mean, there's evidence that there were people there before him, and it was just ignored because it wasn't the Europeans who were there. Okay. Also, let me flip in this book that I'm looking at. Page 46. Okay. There is also evidence based off of spear points and different artifacts that were found in South America that shows that those artifacts belong to African nations. And so that means that they were probably there before Columbus. Also, the fact that there were black slaves living in South America, that suggests that, you know, black people who were predominantly from Africa at this time, they came to the New World, and, you know, long before Columbus did. Okay, so just want to throw that out there. Okay, another misconception, you probably are always heard that Columbus's crew, they tried to mutiny him. They wanted to throw him overboard and everything because they were like, you're going to sail us off the edge of the world. Okay, that's not really true. They got tired of being like confined in a ship together for so long, and they got tired and annoyed by Christopher Columbus, probably because he falsified a lot of records on the ship. Like, he said at the time that he didn't want his crew to know how far away from home they really were because he didn't want to scare them. But in all reality, he was trying to hide the navigation and the routes to get to the Indies. He didn't want anyone else to know how far or, you know, what direction to go to get to the east by sailing west. Okay. Columbus began the precedent of taking indigenous people's land. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He showed up and he claimed that land for the Queen of England. You know, all the stories are like he reached the New World and he bowed down and he thanked God, and, you know, maybe that happened, but sources indicate what most likely happened was like, this is my land and everything that is here is mine. Okay. And let me read you a quote by Christopher Columbus. This is from his journal. He said, I could conquer the whole of them with 50 men and govern them as I pleased. So he said right off the bat, when he saw these indigenous people, you know, I could take over. And actually, when he first landed there, he wrote, you know, they're kind people, they're strong people, they're good people. And then later he changed his mind because he was like, oh, I need to enslave them. So then he started saying they're dumb, they're not very intelligent, you know, they need us to direct and guide them. I'm just like, Columbus, you're so full of crap. Like, it hurts me. Okay. Another thing, Christopher Columbus started the transatlantic slave trade. That is true. Okay. When he landed in the Bahamas, or, in the Caribbean, he took back with him about 25 slaves to Spain. Now, because they were not treated well because of diseases that they encountered, only about 7 or 8 of them actually made it back to Spain. When they got there, the Queen of Spain, she was like horrified. She's like, oh my gosh, we're not enslaving people. These are my subjects. Like, you cannot enslave my people. That's just wrong. And Columbus was like, oh, my bad. My bad. So he took them back. Most of them died before they got there, though. So, that sucks. But, that's all on Christopher Columbus. Next thing. On his return voyages, when he got to the islands, he demanded gold. Okay, he saw that some of the Native Americans, they had like gold in their nose, or they had it like on necklaces or earrings or different things like that. And he was like, I want that. So he was convinced that they had tons of gold. He also demanded that they give him food, they give him spun cotton, and then they give him indigenous women so that he could gift them to his soldiers and his men to have sex with. Okay. He essentially took women and made them sex slaves for his men as gifts. Okay. At one point, Christopher Columbus, he wrote in his journal that, where did it go? I'll get to that one in a minute. Okay, but back to this. He punished the indigenous peoples with disfigurement. So if they didn't listen, or maybe they wouldn't convert to Christianity, or, obviously they have no idea what they're doing anyhow because they don't speak the Spanish language. But it was nothing for Christopher Columbus to chop off a hand or an arm or a nose just to prove a point. Even for something simple, just what should be a slap on the wrist, he would chop their nose off or their ear off just to make a point. Okay. And he would use any excuse to use violence against the indigenous people. At one point there is a primary source, and I think it was Las Casas who was there with him, and he wrote down all kinds of things in his journal, and he wrote down all kinds of letters to the Spanish monarchs. But he basically said, the indigenous people were like picking up rocks and making knives and stuff like that. And Christopher Columbus was like, oh my gosh, they're trying to have an uprising against me. He used that as an excuse to attack them. And, he has all sorts of weapons that they don't have. He even said they didn't even know what a sword was. Like their knives and stuff were made out of stone at the time. They hadn't seen swords before. But one of the things that's so sad, like he sent attack dogs on them and had them torn to pieces. There's evidence of him getting like native babies and using them as dog food for his attack dogs. Okay. And because of this, that was one reason that many natives died. But in addition to that, many natives were killed with diseases. They were being exposed to these European diseases that they had no immunity to. Smallpox, influenza, different things like that. And so they died at a very, very rapid rate. Christopher Columbus, in his journal, he wrote, although they die now, they will not always die. So he's like, yeah, they'll die now, but it's okay. We'll find more. Don't worry about it. I'm like, oh, okay. You're kind of a jerk. How insensitive. But that's what he said. And then following up on the violence, Christopher Columbus created the tribute system. And the tribute system was basically, he would tell each native person, okay, you have to give me X number of pounds of gold by the end of this time period. If you do, I will give you a token. And you wear that token like as a necklace. And that way everybody knows, hey, you've reached your quota. But if you don't reach your quota, they would kill you. And the thing was, there wasn't a lot of gold to be had. And so these natives, they spend all their time looking for gold so that they don't get killed. And then what happens, they don't work in their gardens, they don't cultivate their fields, and they end up, if they do find enough gold, they die of malnutrition. And so it was just a really, really bad system. Eventually, the tribute system broke down because there wasn't anything for them to find. They couldn't meet Columbus's standards, and they were all just getting killed. So instead, Columbus put in place the encomienda system, in which he granted entire Indian villages to individual colonists. Like, an individual colonist would be given a village of native people, and those native people were working for that colonist. Now, it wasn't called slavery, so the Spanish were okay with it because they didn't want to have slaves, because that wasn't Christian, I guess. I don't know. And so that became like the official thing that the Spanish started doing. They just started giving entire villages to one person, and that one person would use them as their workers. Okay. Now, there was a man there named Pedro Cordoba, and he wrote a letter to King Ferdinand in 1517. And I want to read you what he wrote. As a result of the suffering and hard labor they endured, the Indians choose and have chosen suicide. Occasionally, 100 have committed mass suicide. The women, exhausted by labor, have shunned conception and childbirth. Many, when pregnant, have taken something to abort and have aborted. Others, after delivery, have killed their children with their own hands, so as not to leave them in such oppressive slavery. Okay, that's pretty bad if you are committing mass suicide so that you don't have to live underneath these people who are doing this to you. And as a mother, the thought of living in such a bad situation that I'm going to kill my own baby so they don't have to live through that, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. But that is what these native people were living through under Christopher Columbus. They were killing their own children so that he could not torture and enslave them. Okay. Now, this is where this leads me to talk to you about genocide. Genocide is the mass wiping out of an entire population of people. So let me just give you some numbers. Haiti, where Christopher Columbus landed. It is estimated that before he got there, there were 8 million people on that island. Okay? In 1496, 4 years after Columbus landed there, they took a census. There are estimates that there were only 1.1 native people, 1.1 million native people left alive. Now, accounts vary. Some say 1.1 million, some say 3 million. But despite that, I mean, even if it was 3 million, that's 5 million people that have died. 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, if that gives you some kind of scale where you could put this on. Okay. Now, all of those people were not tortured and murdered by the Spanish and Christopher Columbus. A lot of them died of diseases, but so did people in concentration camps. Okay. A lot of them, it just wasn't a good situation. By 1516, it's estimated that only 12,000 native people remained on that island. 12,000. And that's from Las Casas, one of the guys I'd already talked to you guys about that had these primary sources that we're looking at. And then in 1542, they estimate that there were only 200 full-blooded Haitian Indians alive on the island. And then by 1555, it's estimated that they were all gone, that they killed all of them. Okay, so that's what's going on. And then the ones who didn't die, like I told you guys before, some of them were put into sex trafficking. And if you don't believe me about that, Christopher Columbus wrote in his own journal that, I'll just read it to you directly. 100 Castigliones are as easily obtained for a woman as a farm. And it is very general, and there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. So it's not even grown women. It's 9 and 10-year-old girls that he is allowing to be given to his men to rape a 9 and 10-year-old girl. And that's what's going on. And as a result of some of the things that Christopher Columbus's men did, we're going to see that the spread of sexually transmitted diseases is going to be very intense. Now, some people say Columbus and his men introduced some of these sexually transmitted diseases to Europe. That's pretty false. A lot of these diseases were already existing in Europe, but the fact of the matter is that after Columbus and his men, they went and plundered the Americas, and we're going to see a resurgence of sexually transmitted diseases, specifically syphilis. Okay. But what happens is Christopher Columbus, he starts to run out of native people. They all die. And so what's he going to do? He's got to have somebody get his gold and all of his food and all of those things. So he decides, I'm going to start importing slaves. So that's what he did. To replace the dying Haitians, the Spanish imported tens of thousands more Indians from the Bahamas when they ran out of slaves there. Then they're going to turn to Africa. Okay. And Las Casas again, I want to read you a primary source. This is from a letter that he wrote. A ship without a compass, chart, or guide, but only following the trail, a ship without a compass, chart, or guide, but only following the trail of dead Indians who had been thrown from the ships could find its way from the Bahamas to Hispaniola. So many of these natives died that were taken from other islands that you could just watch their dead bodies. That's how you could follow the ships. You didn't need navigation. You could follow their dead bodies when they were thrown overboard. Okay? And I think because the Indians died, Indian slavery then led to the massive slave trade with Africa. And I think this was initiated around 1505, and that's something that Columbus's son said. Okay, so again, I'm trying to reference primary sources here, not he said, she said type stuff. I'm looking at people who were actually there, what they said. Okay. Another thing about Christopher Columbus, he is partially responsible for the development of racism. In Europe before this point in time, people didn't consider themselves to be white people. They considered themselves to be French or Castilian or Portuguese or something like that. But now when they start to go to different places in the world, they're like, oh, these native people or these people from Africa, they look different than us. And so that's when they started categorizing people based off of the way they looked. And because of this transatlantic slave trade, now we have an entire class of people who are considered to be inferior based off of the way that they look. And that's something that Christopher Columbus is one of the ones who started that. Okay. And that's one of the things that is just completely disheartening. So, the question is, why do we celebrate Christopher Columbus? If he did all of these terrible, terrible things, why do we celebrate him? In the United States, there are only 2 people named by name that have a holiday in their honor. Martin Luther King Jr. and Christopher Columbus. Martin Luther King Jr., that dude deserves his holiday. Christopher Columbus, in my opinion, no. Okay? At one point, and we've talked about this in class, Catholics were discriminated against hardcore in the United States. And so at one point they thought, oh, we need to find us a Catholic who did great things, so maybe we can change that stigma. Okay? And they thought, oh, Christopher Columbus, he discovered America. He was Catholic. Let's celebrate him. So that's one of the reasons they started celebrating Christopher Columbus Day. But when they did that, I don't think that all of the people who started that really had any concept of the awful things that he had truly done. Okay. Now, did Christopher Columbus do some good things? Yeah, he did. The trade that was created based off of his journeys to the Americas, it was awesome. A lot of the medicines that are used today, they came from plants that are in the Americas. Okay. A lot of the foods that are eaten all around the world, those foods came from the Americas. Christopher Columbus helped initiate that trade. Okay. This age of discovery. Okay. But despite that, I can't get on board with the Columbus Day thing. I would rather celebrate the indigenous people who actually found America and who lived here and settled here. And just side note, does anybody know who America is named after? Thank goodness it's not Columbus. It's named after Amerigo Vespucci. Vespucci, that's a sweet name. He was a map maker, and I believe he was the first guy to like actually draw out the Americas, and so they credited, I mean, they didn't say he discovered it, but that's why we're named North America, United States of America. But anyhow, I just thought you might like to know that. So again, yes, Christopher Columbus, he did start the age of discovery where people went out and they started exploring all the time, and they started, interacting and trading with people. Yes, that is true. But he also started sexual trafficking. He also started the transatlantic slave trade. He also, committed genocide. He also is part of the reason that we have racism in our society today. That's partially his fault. So, with that being said, what I just want to encourage you guys to do is utilize primary sources. And this is relevant even in today's society, especially with like the elections going on. Don't always read all the news sources. Those are not primary sources. Go to the direct source and find out where your information is coming from and base your decisions off of that. Okay? So, I'm not going to wish you happy Christopher Columbus Day. I am going to wish you happy Indigenous Peoples Day because, as my shirt says, Columbus is a fraud!